going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Sports Blitz Denver. First episode ever. I'm Riggs Tamburo. That is Mr. Bryson Owens. Hope you guys are all doing well. You guys can find Sports Blitz Denver at Sports Blitz Den, D-E-N, on Instagram and Twitter. And then once again, for all you guys listening, Spotify at The Sports Forum. And if you want to watch and listen, we got you guys covered on our YouTube channel at The Sports Forum there as well. But with all that said, Mr. Bryson Owens and I talking some NBA today, talking some NHL. We got NFL Combine. What are the Denver Broncos going to do? Nuggets, Nikola Jokic looking for another MVP award here. And then finally going to wrap things up with our best bets in the Penguins versus Avalanche game. That one going down on Monday night. So with all that, Mr. Owens, let's talk about the NFL Combine, my man. It was a heck of a weekend there. Always fun watching the NFL Combine. Always some speedsters, that put on a show. A couple quarterbacks that were like, what in the world happened to that guy? And the list goes on. However, we're talking Denver Broncos, and there's been a name that people are throwing around for the Denver Broncos in Tez Johnson. Obviously, big ties there with quarterback Bo Nix. Bo Nix ain't going nowhere. He is a Denver Bronco, and he is the starter moving forward. So with all that, I know you know the Tez Johnson story and the relationship there, but you and I were talking a little bit over the weekend, and I know you weren't loving what you were seeing from Tez Johnson, but yet once again, I still see people throwing that name out there that they should target him in that third round, fourth round kind of territory. How you feeling about that right now? Would that be a mistake from Denver?
Yeah, Tez is a fascinating player heading into draft season this year because, like you mentioned, he has the ties with Bo Nix, the adopted brother. Everyone knows the whole story with him and Bo Nix. And he's a fascinating player to break down because if you look at the tape and you look at his production at Oregon, you're like, this is a pretty dang good wide receiver. Like his 2 years at Oregon, his 1 year with Bo Nix as a starting quarterback, he had 1,100 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. He caught 86 passes. Like he was phenomenal for Oregon that year. Then follow that up with another 900-yard season, another 10-touchdown season, another very good year with Dylan Gabriel as his quarterback. And you're like, okay, the production and the tape says he should be, because of his size, somewhere in that third round range where he's a guy who can be maybe a gadget guy in the NFL, maybe more of like what Tyreek Hill was early in his career, maybe not like the number one receiver, but like the deep threat, the get the ball in his hands type of player and let him do some things. And then he had a really good Senior Bowl because there were a lot of questions with him about his size, about all these kinds of things. Killed it at the Senior Bowl. Like there are tapes of him in the one-on-one drills. No one could cover Tez Johnson. And you're like, okay, Tez's stock is starting to rise. And then you can make the connection with Bo Nix. The Broncos are going to be looking to add weapons for Bo Nix this year at a number of positions, tight end, running back, wide receiver. So you know that Tez Johnson's name is going to be connected to Denver. And so this was going to be a big week for Tez Johnson at the Combine, and he kind of laid an egg, unfortunately, for him. I think his stock has now hit a pretty much all-time low for him. The measurables, not great. Came in, measured at just about 5'9", the lightest player in the Combine at 154 pounds, which is terrifying to think of. For those of you who don't know me personally, I'm about 5'9", and I'm about 165. So I am bigger than Tez Johnson, and I am nowhere close to being an NFL prospect by any means.
Yeah.
And so when you're that frame like Tez Johnson is, you have to. I mean, the 40-yard dash gets overrated by a lot of things, but you want to see a good run on the 40-yard dash, especially when you're that frame like Tez is. And to run a 4.51 is not great. Like that was not a good run for him. He didn't test very well in the Combine. So that was a bummer for him this week. I think his draft stock has hit a pretty much low. And unfortunately, I think for the Broncos, I don't think I see a place for Tez on this team. I think his mold of a wide receiver, that kind of gadget player I mentioned, the speed guy, get the ball in his hands and let him do his thing, is already kind of filled with the idea of Marvin Mims, with the idea of Troy Franklin. Like, I think the Broncos have guys who can do the exact thing Tez is good at, and then they're better at other things. They're bigger bodies. Maybe they're slightly more athletic, better athletes with the ball in their hands, whatever the case is. So, unfortunately, as cool of a story as it'd be for Tez Johnson to break into the NFL with Bo Nix as his quarterback, I think it makes more sense after seeing what happened at the Combine for the Broncos to look elsewhere. But then I just mentioned earlier. On the other hand, his tape and his production says the measurables don't matter. Like he
Yep.
is a great route runner, gets open like the best of them in college football. So he's a fascinating player. I'm not touching him if I'm the Broncos personally. I think a couple of things just scare me a little too much, but he is, I think, going to be a good player wherever he lands.
You might not love my comparison here, but he's kind of like a little, obviously littler, young Cortland Sutton to me. He kind of gives me those vibes a little bit of what kind of receiver I think he can be in the NFL. Now, like you mentioned, 154 pounds. I mean, brother.
Yeah.
When I was sick, I was 154 pounds. Like you mentioned, bro is about to be an NFL wide receiver. Like, that's a little bit light. I get that he's 5'9", but I still feel like he should be able to be 165, 167. Like, he should still be a pretty yoked up 5'9". And like you mentioned, what really worries me is exactly what you said about his speed. How is a dude that light, that little? You were nice enough to give him the Tyreek Hill comparison, but are you running a 4.51?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, brother, you got to be clocking a 4.4, a 4.41, you know, with that kind of frame there, if not faster. So for me, I agree with you there. I don't think the combine has really done him any favors. However, I got to be honest with you. I think you mentioned how great he was at Oregon, how great he was in the Reese's Bowl. Mm-hmm. And now we're sitting here and we're saying, oh, but he had a bad draft. He doesn't measure right. He's a little bit light. Oh, maybe this guy should just fall in the draft now. I don't like that. And I know that that's kind of the story going around. But for me, at the end of the day, what do we care about? Shout out Kenny Pickett. How big your hands are? Or do we care about how you play when you're on the football field, which is exactly what you're being drafted to go do? When the guy is on the football field, he burns people. He makes the catches. He gets open. He's a smart wide receiver. I've seen so much good out of Tez Johnson that I'm not going to take a couple bad measurements. And maybe, hey, bro, if you've ran a 40-yard dash before, you know the feeling of running the 40-yard dash. So it could, dude, the littlest thing could be going on. Your hip could be bothering you. You could get a slow start. Like, you could have had a bad breakfast that day, brother, and you might not run as fast as you would the very next day. So I'm not going to sit here after watching him burn really good corners for his whole career and be like, oh, he's not fast enough. I can't get there. So I'm not out on Tez Johnson. However, you talked about it. The Broncos already went after a rookie wide receiver last year in Troy Franklin. And you and I have both been a little bit higher, I think, on Troy Franklin than maybe the production he's put out, because the same thing as Tez Johnson. I think we know how good he can be. And I'm not sold on Troy Franklin yet being done and out of there. So I don't think they need to target Tez. Like you mentioned, it's a great story. I'm sure Bo would love it. But at the end of the day, they already got their Oregon wide receiver. Why would they go after yet another one? So here's my only thing. If the guy falls to like the 6th round, I got to be honest with you, Bryson. At that point, I ain't got a problem with it. I know there's been a few people, after what happened over the weekend, he's going undrafted. Bro, I'm sorry. Yeah. If this guy goes undrafted, we got a problem. All right, Houston, we got a problem. CJ Stroud, come save this man, because I just don't see how a guy from Oregon who balled out in the Senior Bowl goes undrafted. So for me, I'm going to say 6th, 7th round. If I'm Denver, I'm going after him. If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm going after him. If I'm the Patriots, I'm going after him. I think there's some quarterbacks right now that could use a guy that late. But I agree with you. Is he a 3rd round guy, a 4th round guy? That's as early as I see him going.
Yeah. I think Tez needs the right situation for him to be successful in the NFL. He's not a receiver that's going to be ultra productive and help every team in the NFL. He needs to go to a team and a coach specifically that knows how to use players like that. You know, think about what Andy Reid did last year with Xavier Worthy. That's probably another really good comparison for Tez Johnson and Worthy. Worthy came in the NFL, little light. He's got a better frame on him because he's a little bit taller, but he was light coming into last year. but he burned that 40. Like, he broke the 40 record, so that really helped him. And Andy Reid was like, I can work with this. I can work with that kind of speed and athleticism. I think if he could work with someone like Mike McDaniel in Miami with what he's done with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I think he can work with someone. If he does go to Denver, I think Sean Payton, Bo Nix can work with him. I think Sean is one of the better coaches at getting the ball into his playmakers' hands kind of easily. He loves the bubble screens. He loves the quick passes just to get it into his receivers' hands and let them go and work with it. So I think he needs to land in the right situation. I don't think if he goes to Cleveland, he's going to find success in Cleveland, because I don't know if Stefanski can work with those type of receivers. So I think Tez needs to find the right situation. And I think, like you said, if he falls in the 5th or 6th round, he's talented enough and was productive enough, not only at Oregon, but he was productive at Troy before he transferred to Oregon. The year before he went to Oregon, he had 863 yards, 4 touchdowns in the Sun Belt. Like, that's a pretty good season for him. So I think he just needs to find the right situation. I think he can carve out a pretty productive NFL career. I just don't think, kind of like you mentioned, it's not worth making the story happen for Denver unless it's the right spot in the draft. Like you mentioned, we've got Bo Nix, his guy last year with Troy Franklin. I don't think there's a need to force it again with Tez Johnson.
Who's a better wide receiver? Troy Franklin
or Tez
Johnson?
I'd probably take Troy Franklin. I like his size more. At 6'2", I think Troy can break into the 200-pound mark and be a little bit more of a bigger body, physical wide receiver. Troy Franklin last year, for the people who don't know, who saw the production, like just the solid numbers, the yards, the catches, the touchdowns, and like kind of disappointed. They don't dive deep into the fact that he was one of the better receivers in the NFL at getting open. He had some of the best separation rate in the entire NFL. He just had a bit of a trouble catching the football. And that happens with young guys as rookies, even second-year players. That's something that he can, I think, grow into. And I just like his frame more than Tez's. So I would take Troy over Tez.
I agree with you on Troy over Tez. And I don't believe Sean Payton gave him enough chances. I think a couple drops early, they kind of wrote him off. They kind of said, look, you know what? Like, no, let's leave him on the sideline. I remember you and I were talking around like week 13, week 14, and I was like, where's Troy Franklin? Like, what in the world are they doing here? And you're mentioning it. The guy got open. But whether it was, I think what happened was midseason, Sean stopped going his way. And then I think by week 12, week 13, that made Bo stop going his way. And it just kind of didn't shake out well for him. And I do believe that we have not seen the end of Troy Franklin in Denver, and I think he is a good guy moving forward. Here's my one thing, and I just want to put it out there. If the right coach, the right quarterback, the right situation go after Tez Johnson, Bryson, I think his ceiling, call me crazy, Devontae Smith.
I think it's a little high for him. I would probably lean him more towards, I don't have a great player to compare him to, but like a number 3, a gadget guy. I don't think he's ever going to be a 1,200-plus yard receiver. I don't think he's ever going to catch more than 70 passes in a season.
You don't think he could be like a really good wide receiver too, deep ball threat, quick slot guy anywhere?
I don't think so. I just don't think his frame lends itself to that kind of production in the NFL. I think he's going to be he could be a great slot receiver. Like, him in the slot can be very lethal with how quick he gets off the line. He runs great routes. I think that can be his area of expertise. I just don't think he's ever going to be consistent enough. I don't think he's good enough yet to be in that Devontae Smith range. I would say his ceiling, to me personally, on like, if you're building a Super Bowl winning team, he's your number 3. He's not your number 2. He's your number 3, or even closer to being a gadget guy who isn't on the field a ton, but when he's on the field, you're going to get the ball in his hands 3, 4, 5 times a game and let him do something with it.
Fair enough. Well, hey, let's move on over here. We're already on the Broncos. One more topic with the Denver Broncos is if they don't go after a guy like Tez Johnson, and even if they do later on in the draft, who do you believe first round Denver should be targeting right now? When you watch this team last year when they fell short against Buffalo, week in and week out, what did you look at and say, man, they got to get better in that category? Who do you think they're targeting? Not even who, but what position or positions do you believe they need to focus on here round one and maybe even leaking over into round two?
The Broncos are in kind of a fascinating spot here because there's a few areas of positions I think they definitely need help in. I mentioned earlier, they're definitely going to be looking to add weapons for Bo Nix. They're going to get a running back or two. They're going to get a wide receiver or two. They're going to get a tight end or two. And all that is combining the draft and free agency. I think they're going to lean maybe a little bit more towards free agency for a couple of those positions than the draft personally. And then you can look at how the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And the Eagles won the Super Bowl because they just built up that D-line. The Eagles, every year, it seems like they get the best defensive lineman in the draft, or they get the best edge rusher in the draft. And they just built up that D-line to where they did not have to blitz Patrick Mahomes one time in the Super Bowl. It was that front four the entire game. And that gave them 7 players in the secondary. The coverages were tight. They were getting to Patrick Mahomes quickly and early and often. And so you look at how the Eagles built that Super Bowl winning team, and you go, okay, well, the Broncos have Zach Allen. They have John Franklin Myers. They have 2 good edge rushers. You're like, maybe they go the Eagles route and just build up that defensive line more. They beef up that front 7 a little bit more. So there's a few different ways you can look at it. I think it just depends on what philosophy you go into the draft with. Are you a take the best man available type of guy? Are you a fill an immediate need type of guy? Are you a, hey, we're loaded to this position, so let's make it even better, like the Eagles are type of person? I'm a little bit more towards the mix of best player and fill a need kind of guy. So it depends on what the Broncos do in free agency. To me, I think tight end, because there's a couple really good first-round tight ends, is a good option here. But then I was watching the Combine, and the running backs blew me away. Like, the running back class this year is phenomenal. Omarion Hampton from North Carolina, maybe my favorite running back in this draft class. I think Ashton Johnson is going to go before him. I think Omarion might be the better NFL player, in my opinion.
What about the speed? I'm blanking on the Hokie. I'm blanking on the Virginia Tech guy with the speed, the 4.4.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name too, but that rose his stock up. Like, the running backs in this combine, that was probably
Is it Flint? Yeah, Flint something, I think.
Yeah.
Blackwood, Flint. I don't know.
I think the running backs blew everyone else out of the water with this combine, and a lot of guys rose their draft stocks. So there's probably 2 positions I'm really looking at, and guys specifically, Omarion Hampton in the first round. Love him. He's probably, like I said, my favorite running back in this draft class. I also really like Trevion Henderson, the Ohio State running back. I think he's more of a second-round type of pick. If they go tight end, I love me some Colston Loveland. Tyler Warren would be great, but I think he's going to be gone by then. So Colston Loveland, the Michigan tight end, I really like him as well. But then if you go, okay, let's build it the Philadelphia Eagles way. There's a lot of good defensive linemen in this class. There's a lot of good edge rushers in this class. So if I were the Broncos, it depends on what they do in free agency. If they fill a lot of their holes in free agency, maybe they just go best man available in the first round. But to me, I'm probably looking at running back or tight end in the first round.
Well, by the way, just to go ahead and make sure I'm not misspoken since I was, Virginia Tech running back Bayshul Tootin, 4.32.
Yep.
Was the 40-yard dash time there. So some speed coming out of Virginia Tech. But here's the thing, man. I don't know if I'd go first round tight end. I just don't know if you have to.
Yeah.
You know, like I think some of the names you're saying, second round, even third round, there should be a few really good tight end options here that you could go ahead and grab and maybe even move up in, like, let's say, you know, starting the third round, you're looking and you're like, what in the world is that dude doing there? You know what I mean? Maybe you make a move and now you have to give up a hell of a lot less than you do if you take him in the first or second round. So I could see that being a potential option there for the Denver Broncos. But I agree. I think running back is kind of like the slept on area where I think you got to go either what in the world is that running back doing there? And you take that guy, or like you're saying, I think D line, pass rusher, I think you really got to start to consider going after one of those guys, because as good as the Denver Broncos running back room looks on paper, Bryson, you mean how many times did you and I sit there last year and go, what in the world, bro? Like, we averaged 2.1 yards a carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
With a couple dogs in that backfield. So I don't know. I will say, I think if the right running back is there, you go running back. But I'm also not as high on some of these running backs as I think a lot of other people are based on the combine. Like, going into the combine, were people really talking about the running back class? To be fair, not really. I mean, Ashton Jonty. That's all they talked about. And you know me, I think I saw people saying Jonty's going at 6 to the Raiders.
Yeah, that's high.
Come on, bro. Come on, man. No way.
Yeah.
No way. And if you want to, go ahead. But I just don't see why you take that guy at 6. But
yeah, I agree with that. I will say, to your point about the tight end, I really like that point because, like you mentioned, we don't have to go tight end in this class. It's a good tight end class too. And there's a couple of names. Gunnar Helm, by most other places projections, is either like anywhere from the 3rd to like the 5th ranked tight end in this class. You can get him in the 2nd or 3rd round. If you want to get a Oregon guy for Bo Nix, go double down in Oregon players back-to-back years. Terrence Ferguson, his tight end, a Denver native, that's a good option too in the later rounds. So like you said, I don't think tight end is like necessary for the Broncos in the 1st round, but it's such a glaring hole. I mean, the Broncos had the 31st, I believe, 31st ranked production out of tight ends this last year. That's not good enough. And you look at some of the teams who made deep playoff runs. You're looking at the Eagles with Dallas Goedert, the Chiefs with Travis Kelce, the Ravens with Mark Andrews. I know he had a bad last game, but he was phenomenal for them before that game. You look at the Bills and all their tight ends. Like,
the Steelers, they didn't go as far as they wanted to, but Pat Freiermuth, how much did he help that team get to where they were going?
Yep, Pat was huge
Mark
for them.
Andrews.
You look at the Lions, all the really good teams who people were like, yeah, that team can make a deep run. A common denominator not only was like the quarterback and head coach, obviously, but was tight ends. Tight ends were huge for them because they're easy 5-yard completions, easy red zone.
Who was the best offensive player on the Raiders last year?
Oh, yeah. Brock Bowers was one of the best offensive weapons in all of football. And I know it didn't really help that quarterback room, but when they get a quarterback, he's going to thank his lucky stars the Raiders took Brock Bowers when they did. So tight end is huge. It doesn't have to be a 1st-round pick. It's just such a glaring hole that if Sean Payton falls in love with Colston Loveland, I'm not going to be like, didn't love that pick, Sean. If Sean Payton loves Colston Loveland,
as long as they don't move up for him.
Yes, that's exactly what I was kind of leaning towards. There isn't a single player in this draft class, to me, personally, where I'm moving up to take. If anything, there's a lot of players I'm happy with moving down.
Player or tight end?
Player. There isn't a single player. If I'm the Broncos, I'm like, yeah, this class is deep with like solid players. It doesn't have a ton of those like, I got to go get him type of guys. It doesn't have a lot of those, I'm moving up 5 picks because he's fallen to 15 and I got to get him now kind of guy. So if I'm the Broncos,
it's more of a 2nd or 3rd round type of move up for me.
Yes.
Agree.
This draft is going to kill it in the 2nd and 3rd round this year. Like, you're going to get a lot of really good NFL players in the 2nd and 3rd round this year.
Yeah, I mean, Rudy Reyes and I were talking on the Sports Blitz Pittsburgh show, and one guy we were throwing out there was like, well, should they go quarterback, in the 1st round? Yes or no? Will they get a veteran? Whatever. And we were kind of talking, and we were like, who's a couple guys that could fall to that 2nd round? We were talking quarterbacks, but like we were talking Jalen Milroe could fall. Dylan Gabriel could fall.
Oh, yeah.
We don't think Jackson Dart's going to fall, but if he fell, God forbid, to the 28th pick, you could bet your butt someone's coming up to get him.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's definitely an open door. But for the Denver Broncos right now, just to wrap up this Denver Broncos conversation, if there was one position you want to see them go for in the 1st round, who is it? Or what is it?
Yeah, it's so tough. I think I'm going to preference this by saying it depends on what they do in free agency.
Mhm.
This is why I love when the draft is in the NFL, because you get free agency first. So you get to see
Mhm.
what holes you need to be filled and if you need to go a specific way or not. I'm going to say, because of how bad the running back production was last year, and I know Sean Payton wants to run the football. You saw him in New Orleans with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. They were a run-first football team during the latter parts of Drew Brees' career when they were going to NFC championship games pretty consistently. They ran the
Mhm.
football really well. I know he wants to run the football in Denver too to help out Bo Nix. So I think running back in the first round is where I would go. Specifically,
Mhm.
Omarion Hampton, if he falls to them at 20, I think would be an excellent pick for Denver. You get him on a cheap deal for 4 years. You get your running back on a 5th-year team option after that. So you get your running back cost controlled for 5 years. And if he breaks and if he hits for you, you saw how valuable running backs were this year. We talked about tight ends. Saquon Barkley was huge for the Eagles, obviously, this year. Derrick Henry for the Ravens. Like,
Yep.
running backs are making a bit of a comeback. And so if you can get that running back for 5 years, that's huge for your team.
Mm. I'm right there with you, man. It's going to be a wide open door, but I'm with you. I do lean running back right now. They just put Bo Nix in way too many 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. Come on, bro. Like, you got to be able to run the ball forward and get to 2nd and 7 every drive.
Yep.
At bare minimum, like, you got to get 4 yards running on the first play. And if you can't get that, like you just mentioned Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, they hand him the ball and they have a 2nd and 5 to a 2nd and 7 every single time.
Yep.
If they don't get the first down, you know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to get that. And I know you were a little bit hard on Bo Nix towards the end of the year last year, but I think a lot of that was because we saw him struggle on 3rd downs. And I think that's because they didn't have a run game to help them on the first 2 downs. So we'll see what happens, folks. But like Bryson mentioned, a lot of time here, like 53, 54 days until the NFL draft. So we'll see the moves that they make between now and then. But stick around, have fun, get ready for some more stuff coming out from us at Sports Blitz Den, aka Sports Blitz Denver, for some more news on the Denver Broncos. But let's move on over, my man, and talk about the Denver Nuggets. And I was going to talk to you about some road struggles because you know me, I've been talking a lot of, let's just call it what it is. I'm talking a lot of shit when the Denver Nuggets go on the road. But to my surprise, they're not that bad on the road, actually. The 5th best record on the road right now for the Denver Nuggets. But I'm going to go ahead and ask you one question about the road struggles, because I get that the record itself on paper looks decent. But Bryson, I feel like when I watch the Denver Nuggets play at home or on the road, they don't look like the same team on the road. I don't care if they're winning. It still ain't pretty when they are winning. So help me out here. What is it about going on the road? Because if you can't play well on the road, you can't make it to the championship. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think a couple of the major struggles for the Nuggets recently, especially on the road. One, we haven't been super healthy. Now, I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I just wanted to throw that out there. Aaron Gordon's missed a couple of games in a row because of an ankle injury. We haven't had Peyton Watson for almost a month now because of a knee injury. So, like, a couple important players banged up. Not an excuse, because you still have Nikola Jokic. You still have Jamal Murray, who's playing phenomenal basketball ever since the month of January came. Like, since January 1st, Jamal Murray's looked every bit of an all-star level point guard for this team. And so when you have those two, there's no real excuses to struggle on the road. I think a couple of the reasons it's been happening, one is a couple of the key rotational players for the Nuggets are young. You have Julian Strawther, second-year player. Zeke Naji, while he's been in the NBA for a few years, he hasn't had a whole lot of NBA playing time, so he's still considered a young player by a lot of standards. Christian Brown, who's been playing phenomenal for the Nuggets this year, still only in his 3rd season, so he's still a young player. And young players just tend to struggle a little bit more on the road than they do at home. It's a universal fact in the NBA. Young players don't play well on the road. So that's part of it. When you have so many guys who aren't used to being key rotational players on really good teams like the Nuggets are asking these guys to be, on the road, they tend to be a little bit sluggish. And home teams tend to, I think this is a recent thing in the NBA, but home teams tend to get away with being a little bit more physical than road teams do. Home teams get a little bit of a better whistle than road teams do when it comes to being physical in the NBA. And the Nuggets, it comes and goes with them. But if you get physical with Denver, they're more often than not, they kind of shy away from that. Like Michael Porter Jr. does not do well with physicality. Russell Westbrook gets flustered when you get physical with him. He's a physical guy. Like he wants to be physical. But when you're physical with him first, Westbrook gets a little frazzled, gets a little bit in his head sometimes. Jokic, when he's getting bodied by people and not getting calls early, you can see it on his face. He gets frustrated with refs early in games, and he does some things that you're like, Jokic, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't Jokic shouldn't cater to the refs like that in games like that. So on the road, when teams get physical with Denver just for whatever reason kind of falters. So I think those are the two main reasons they've been struggling on the road as of late. Physicality and just a couple of young guys who are asked to do a little bit more than they're used to. And that kind of doesn't work well on the road a lot of times.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Avalanche here in just a minute and that game coming up against the Penguins here on Monday night. But when I think about Jokic and the way he kind of gets, like you mentioned, flustered and he's talking too much shit. It's like, bro, you're the star. You don't have to. That's what all the other dudes are there for. You got Russell Westbrook on your team, bro. If you get into it, this is when Westbrook and MPJ, they should be stepping in going, yeah, hey, yo, back the F up, bro, or we're going to have a problem. And Jokic, like you've seen the Trae Young clip where Trae Young's walking off the court, and he gets shoulder bumped and right? Yep. And his homies handle it. You're supposed to handle it for Joker. And I get it. Like he wants to talk a little bit. Cool. You don't watch the Avalanche and see Nathan McKinnon fighting. You don't see Cale Makar fighting.
Yeah.
That's not how it goes. Everybody else is supposed to do that. So I agree with you. I think they get a little bit too caught up in it. And it's almost like the emotion doesn't do them well. It does them negatively. And that's just something that I think they're going to have to figure out, because when they do run into the Thunder and the T-Wolves and the Lakers, all those dudes talk shit.
They're physical.
All of them. So, and they're very, very physical. So like you're going to have to figure out a way to poise yourself instead of getting overly emotional. So you're right. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's the emotion, the physicality. I could see that being the problem. But in my opinion, when we just saw them lose another one, and I get it, it's in Boston, it's at the Celtics, whatever. But the Cavs just beat Boston in Boston a couple days ago. You got to win those games, bro. You're going to have to eventually win those games, or things aren't going to go well for you in the postseason. But my final question for you, it's about the man on the screen here. Nikola Jokic right now is the second favorite to win the MVP award. He has jumped up in the rankings. He was fourth on this board about 30 days ago, and he's now second at plus 300. Shai is obviously still the favorite. However, he was minus 1,200 30 days ago, Bryson. The gap is closing. Would you bet Nikola Jokic today, or is this award game, set, match unless Shai goes down?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really frustrating year for the MVP for the Nuggets fans, because I think it's going to remind all of us a little bit of when Embiid won his MVP. Like this is the best season Jokic has ever played. He's won 3 MVPs already, and everyone has already admitted this is the best year of his career. I mean, he's having one of the best, most efficient offensive seasons in NBA history. He's averaging a 29-point triple-double off of incredible efficiency scoring the basketball. And he's probably not going to win it, largely because Shai is the best player on the best team in the Western Conference. Like the Thunder are going to be first in the West probably by 8 to 10 games. Like they're going to run away with the Western Conference. And when you're the best player averaging like 32 points per game like Shai is on a team like that, they tend to gravitate towards that a little bit more. I think winning is important. Like you can't be a 10th seed in the NBA and be the MVP. Like that doesn't correlate. But I think once you're a team, like once you're a player in the top 3 seeds, I think at that point winning shouldn't matter as much. It should be what you do individually. And I think Nikola Jokic has been better than Shai has this year. Not to take anything away from Shai, because Shai's been absolutely phenomenal. He's been fantastic for the Thunder this year. Another thing I'm always going to say is Nikola Jokic is the only MVP in NBA history. There's only one, and it's Nikola Jokic, to have more than one MVP and never have an all-star teammate. Like, that just screams the word valuable. Like, when you are literally the only guy on your team to consistently be an all-star, be that level of a player, and your team still wins, your team's still highly seeded when it comes to the playoffs, that says something. Shea has not only one all-star, he had Jalen Williams make the all-star team with him this year. If Chet Holmgren was healthy, he'd probably be in the all-star game with them as well. So I think Shea has a little bit more help than Jokic does. I think Jokic is having a top 5 season in NBA history by an individual standpoint. And so should Jokic win it? Yes. Do I think he will? No, largely because voter fatigue is a real thing in the NBA. I think they're tired of seeing the same guy win it a lot. And Shea's going to win the Western Conference regular season by almost 10 games. And I think that's going to stand out in a big way when it comes to voting season.
So you would not tell people to bet Jokic today at plus 300?
I wouldn't. I know there's been a recent push, like you mentioned, the odds are getting closer. A couple of the MVP leaderboards.
We see this all the time.
Yep. A couple of the MVP leaderboards had Jokic number 1 over the last couple of weeks. So I get why it's enticing. I just think they're going to find every reason they can to not give it to Jokic, just like they did a couple of years ago when they gave it to Embiid.
And I'll be honest with you folks, for all you sports bettors out there, this is giving me Paul Skeens vibes right now. It's giving me the rookie of the year. He's this massive favorite. Everybody takes him, and then he gets such a big favorite that nobody bets on the MVP anymore because they're like, oh, well, it's Paul Skeens. If you missed it, you missed it. And then all of a sudden, they had 2 or 3 names that kept creeping in there, and people started betting people like, uh-oh, whatever. And at the end of the day, when it was all said and done, they just gave it to Paul Skeens. And it's like they're just trying to bait you. And as much as I want to grab this at plus 300, folks, let me tell you, if Bryson Owens, Denver diehard out here, is telling you not to take it, don't take it. I'm right there with him. I'm not going to argue. I love me a plus 300, but at this point, I kind of agree with you, Bryson. If it's not more than plus 500, I don't want it. And if it is more than plus 500, it probably ain't going to happen anyway. So there you go, guys. Stay off this one. Enjoy it. If you got SGA early in the season, congratulations. But at this point, it seems like you kind of missed the value if you're going to do anything else. So that is that. We'll keep an eye on the Denver Nuggets, though. Going to talk next week on the show about the Denver Nuggets' chances to go ahead and maybe make a big 3 push, a top 2 push, what it would take for them, to dethrone the Thunder out of the number 1 spot. We'll see where we're at 7 days from now. But for now, go ahead and stay off that. But the Denver Nuggets looking pretty solid at the moment. But one more team to talk about here. Like we promised, we're not going to leave you guys without leaving you a sports bet here from Monday night. The Colorado Avalanche taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Shout out Sports Blitz Pittsburgh once again, my man. Coming into this game, the Avalanche are playing pretty darn good hockey right now. They've consistently put a few wins together. We all know when they play at Ball Arena, they tend to play much better than they do when they don't play at Ball Arena. The goaltending is getting better for the Avalanche as well. Georgiev is kind of taking a step back. We're seeing that man step on in and go ahead and take his spot a little bit there in Mackenzie Blackwood coming over from the used-to-be Arizona Coyotes. So with all that, my man, the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2 of their last 3 games, they have lost in overtime, 5-4. I want to say 5-4, and then another massive one, like 6-5 yesterday. So right now, the Pittsburgh Penguins have got their work cut out for them in this game here against the Avalanche. No line out on this game yet, but we can assume Avalanche are going to be favored. I'm going to assume it's somewhere in the realm of like minus 225 for the Colorado Avalanche. Penguins come in around plus 150-ish. With all that said, Penguins, you lose 2 in a row. Well, 2 of your last 3 in overtime. Bryson, could there be a little bit of motivation here from the Penguins to go out there and finally put it together and get a big win over a big-time team?
I think there's definitely a little bit of motivation there. But like you mentioned, the Avalanche are playing some pretty dang good hockey right now. They're on a 2-game win streak in their own right. And then you mentioned it, at home, they've been pretty darn solid this year. 18-10-2 at home this year at Ball Arena. And ever since they made the move to Mackenzie Blackwood as their primary goaltender, like you mentioned, the ship has been righted for the Colorado Avalanche. Early in the year, the whole story was how they couldn't stop anyone. Everyone was scoring, 5, 6, 4, whatever it was. Everyone was scoring on the Colorado Avalanche. It was bad. Like, I think for the first month in the year, they were a bottom 5 goaltending team in the league. And now they've climbed their way back up in those ranks. Overall, over the entire course of the season, they've clawed their way up into 17th in goals allowed, and a lot of that has to do with what they've done over the last few months with Blackwood in as goaltender. And then one thing I've really liked by the Avalanche this year is they saw early they weren't good enough. They weren't going to be good enough to go on a Stanley Cup run. So they're like, you know what? Okay, we're going to make some moves. We're going to trade people. You're not going to like some of the trades. Mikko Rantanen got traded. Avs fans didn't like it. Fun fact, it's worked out. The guy they've brought in played pretty darn well for the Avalanche. They made the move for Mackenzie Blackwood as goaltender. They made another move for some defensemen from the Rangers. So I like the fact that the Avs have been aggressive, getting better. And I think a lot of that's going to show in this game with against the Pittsburgh Penguins at home. They have the far better goaltender, in my opinion, between the two of them. The Avalanche have the far better offense. Like, that's one thing that's been consistent all year with McKinnon, with whoever else has been around them. They've been able to put up points, put up goals like that. Like, it's been easy for them this year. So I think this is a spot to take the Avalanche. I think they're the better team. I think they're the hotter team. And this is going to be one of the first few games this year where, like, all the trade pieces are there for the Avalanche. They kind of have some cohesion. They've had some guys play together for the first time in a few games in a row. So I think this is a good spot for the Avalanche.
Sorry, Pittsburgh. This ain't going to be pretty, bro. This ain't going to be pretty. They might get murdered. Now, you did mention the Avalanche having a much better offense, and I do agree with you. Overall, they do. However, the Penguins have scored damn near 15 goals in their last 3 games. I mean, they score. They just can't keep you from scoring. So as long as Mackenzie is the announced starter, I would feel very, very good about Colorado in this game. Now, he has played a few games in a row, and I could see this being kind of the break game before the next road trip gets going and all that. So if they do choose to go with a guy like Georgiev, or even if they go down the list here and they go for, a Noonan or something like that, that would be a little bit concerning for me if I'm Colorado. Now, once again, Bryson, let me tell you right now, if Mackenzie does not play this game, folks, don't even look at this game. Just take the over. Just take the over, and I'll meet you at the bank at about 10 p.m. because we're going to be cashing those tickets, because there's something about this game that says Colorado, I don't see a world they don't score 4 goals. I mean, minimum 4 goals. So if not, do I think the Penguins are good for 3 goals here? I do, as long as it's not Mackenzie. This could be a 5-4, 6-4 kind of hockey game, nonstop action. I do like the Avalanche to get it done, but I will be taking the over in this game pretty much no matter what, because even if it's Mackenzie, then it's probably at 6, 6.5, and I would still bank on Colorado winning this game like 5-2, 4-3, something like that. So with all that said, Mr. Bryson Owens, anything else going on in Denver at the very moment that can't wait until next week for the people?
I think there's some good stuff happening. I know it's the Colorado Rockies, so I'm not going to get too ahead of myself, but the Rockies have looked good in spring training. There's some young prospects to be excited about over there, especially in the pitching department. Shocker, for the first time, maybe in my lifetime, there's some exciting players in the pitching department for the Colorado Rockies. So spring training has been pretty fun for them. I think you're going to get into the most important month of the year for the Nuggets. I know we kind of already talked about them a little bit, but March is probably the most important month of the year for the Nuggets. They've really got to make a push against a tough schedule. They have a tough schedule ahead of them this year. So those are 2 things I've been focusing on a lot for Colorado sports. I've enjoyed seeing some of the young guys develop in the Rockies spring training. And then this month is going to be an interesting one for Denver. This one's going to make or break the Nuggets this season. They're either going to finish the 2 seed with a lot of momentum going into the playoffs, or they could finish like the 5th seed and have to really fight their way through the playoffs this year. So keep an eye out for those 2 things.
likewise, I think the Colorado Avalanche are in the exact same position. I think they're in a spot right now where they hold their own, they hold the cards. Either go out here, keep doing what you're doing, win 65% or more of your hockey games, and you're going to be just fine. But if you go on a 3 or 4 game losing streak, if you go on a 3 or 4 game win streak, your standings are going to look a hell of a lot different. And Bryson, I know you've seen those NHL playoff brackets. The West is a effing gauntlet, my brother. You don't want to draw the Stars or something. You want to draw the Oilers or the Canucks or something like that. So you got to get up to that 1, 2, or 3 spot in the NHL as well. So the Nuggets, the Avalanche, fighting for their lives right now, and then the Colorado Rockies. Bryson, look, man, I love spring training. But every year, the best baseball they play is in spring training.
100%.
So, like you said, can't get too excited yet. Yeah. So anyway, guys, with all that, we're going to go ahead and get up out of here. Appreciate you guys. This has been episode 1 of Sports Blitz Denver every week for you, Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern time on Spotify and YouTube. Once again, at the Sports Forum. Do us a favor and subscribe at Sports Blitz Den on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, our main page at Sports Forum CO. Bryson Owens, Riggs Tamburo. We'll see you guys next Monday. And until then, go Denver.